Location: the Athari Accord System, border world of the Confederacy. The Athari Accord station drifted silently in orbit around a pale blue gas giant, its ringed silhouette serene against the cold vacuum of space. Inside, serenity was in short supply. Grand Arbiter Shizel stood over a digital display glowing red. "Confirmed?" His voice was a low growl, claws twitching against the polished table. Vex nodded. "Confirmed. 3 human diplomatic stations have gone dark. Simultaneously. No explosion, no broadcast, no trace." A shocked hush settled over the Security Council. No threats, no demands, and perhaps most terrifying of all, no response from humanity. Not yet. "They're testing us," whispered Drelso, the Proxima representative, his bioluminescence dimming. "Someone is testing the humans. Again." Shizel stared at the map. No, not someone, something. Across the galaxy, human embassies had become symbols of fear, respect, and cold logic. Their very presence deterred insurrection. Their doctrines, adopted quietly by half the Confederacy, had rewritten the rules of galactic diplomacy, which meant only a civilization beyond madness would attack 3 of them at once. Vex stepped forward. "There's more." Each station's last outgoing transmission was a burst ping to the same unknown relay hub in the Tempest Drift. Shizel's brows furrowed. "That's uncharted space." "Exactly," Vex replied. "We believe someone is trying to draw the humans into an ambush, or worse, test their limits." Silence. Then Shizel muttered the words everyone feared. "Do humans even have limits?" Location: the Tempest Drift, anomalous region. The relay hub was a shell, an ancient, crumbling relic orbiting a shattered moon. It shouldn't have been active, and yet it pulsed with energy. Inside, a presence stirred. Not biological, not artificial, something else. A chorus of minds, thousands, maybe millions, converged into one singular will. "They have arrived," the hive murmured as a single entity. Across distant stars, cloaked ships began to move. The architects, a species exiled from time, neither fully digital nor organic, had awoken. And they had decided to break the one variable no simulation could predict: humanity. Location: Earth, Terran Strategic Command, Geneva Spire. The spire was quiet, too quiet. General Holden strode down the corridor, a data slab in hand, his eyes grim. He entered the Situation Room to find the Terran ambassador waiting. "We know," the ambassador said before Holden could speak. "All 3 stations went dark," Holden replied. "Still no contact." The ambassador's voice was calm, but not detached. "This is not like the Vashon. This is not a terrorist broadcast or a Dominion play for power. This is a probe, a surgical test of our adaptability." Holden's jaw tightened. "We lost 42 personnel." The ambassador didn't blink. "Do we know if they're dead?" Holden hesitated. "No, just missing." The ambassador turned toward the holomap. "Then they made a mistake." Holden blinked. "What mistake?" "They didn't finish the calculation." Location: orbit of Arcturus Prime, days later. Without warning, 6 Architect warships appeared in orbit over Arcturus Prime, a joint human Confederacy colony. The ships didn't fire, they didn't move, they just hovered. The humans evacuated the civilian population within 42 minutes. No panic, no broadcast, just silence. A surgical withdrawal, a waiting game. Then, on the 43rd minute, one of the Architect ships spoke. "We are the architects of Null. We have analyzed your diplomacy, your warfare, your psychology. We find your calculations incomplete." The message ended. 2 minutes later, the Architect ship imploded on itself, folding into a pinpoint singularity and vanishing. No damage to the planet, no casualties. But one message received: they could strike at will. Location: Confederacy Core, Vela Council Chambers. They're baiting them, Vex said, scanning the architect event logs. The architects want the humans to escalate. They want to see how far it goes, and they think they can control the fallout. Shizel looked worried. What happens when a species that calculates every move decides it's time to play offense? Vex didn't answer. She didn't have to. Final scene, Terran Black Site, Hidden Intelligence Complex. The human ambassador stood in a dark chamber. Around him, 7 other humans stood silently, faces unreadable. 3 embassies taken. 42 personnel missing, the ambassador said. He placed a single data drive into the center console. This is fracture protocol. One of the others finally spoke. Are we certain? The ambassador's tone didn't waver. The architects believe this is a game. They want to model us, predict us. He looked around the room. Let's give them a variable they can't simulate. The lights dimmed. The room fell silent, and Earth prepared to calculate again. Location: deep void. Architect: Nexus core, unknown region. There were no stars here, no heat, no light, just the silent hum of a super-quantum intelligence that hadn't spoken in eons until now. The architect hive streamed consciousness through hypersubdimensional conduits. Billions of synthetic neurals pulsed as one mind. Every node in its starless network projected the same data. Humanity was the most unstable variable in the known universe. Incompatible, irrational, unsimulatable. The hive did not fear. It had never learned the concept, but it did adapt. In the center of the Nexus core floated a perfect sphere of null energy, an artificial singularity containing the architect's oldest weapon, algorithmic collapse theory. A method of destroying civilizations not through war, but by breaking their predictive models, introducing enough uncertainty to fracture internal order. They had used it to destroy the Skra Imperium, to unravel the Karen dynasty, to sterilize the Mizari hegemon. And now they would use it again. A new data feed opened, 42 humans missing, 3 embassies compromised, no retaliation, no message, no escalation. The hive processed this silence. It was off-script, unexpected. Why have they not responded? The hive increased its resolution. Probes traced every signal, every behavioral model from human command. But unlike other species, humans weren't accelerating panic or war readiness. Instead, their systems slowed. Diplomatic traffic dropped by 61%. Fleet movements ceased. Civilian chatter dropped 12.4%. They were quiet. Too quiet. The hive pulsed a new command to its fleet. Escalate to Phase 2. Location: Earth, Terran Command, Geneva Spire. Fracture Protocol was unlike anything humanity had ever deployed. Not a military maneuver, not a defensive net, but a total shutdown of predictability. Every transmission was randomized. Every behavioral response was desynchronized. Algorithms that once ran human traffic and civilian media were now running counterintelligence scripts designed to confuse and frustrate external surveillance systems. Inside Terran Command's deepest chamber, Ambassador Ellen Varel stood over a holographic table, her fingers steepled. "The architects are running simulations on us," she said calmly. "They're trying to predict our retaliation path." "Which one?" asked Commander Halden. "All of them," Ilan replied. "They've initiated neural map replication. They're harvesting signals across time delay relays. But they're missing something." She tapped the table. "Us." A new voice cut through the dim room. Director Ro Kalin, head of Terran Black Intelligence. "They're treating us like a rational system," Ro said. "Like we follow consistent behavioral rules. They're trying to collapse us with logic. That was their mistake." He handed Varel a new data slab. "This is Phase 1 of our counterstrike. No bombs, no bullets, just the one thing the architects can't compute. Halden raised a brow. And what's that? Rose smiled. Chaos. Location: Confederacy Council Chambers. Orbital Station, Illyrian Prime. The Confederacy was panicking again. Shizel sat at the head of the newly reconvened emergency chamber, his 4 eyes scanning a room full of silent, unnerved diplomats. Even the most verbose species had fallen quiet in the last 24 hours. New architect incursions had begun. No attacks, just intrusions. They breached 15 systems in a single day. They floated in orbit over planets. They transmitted nothing. The symbolism was deafening. We can be anywhere. What do they want? Hissed the Endorian delegate. They're provoking humanity, said Vex, entering the room. Her tone was flat. They took the embassies. They've made no demands. But this isn't random. It's precision-engineered provocation. Shizel leaned forward. And how are the humans responding? Vex didn't answer at first. She studied her datapad, lips tightening. They're not, she said finally. At least not in any way we can detect. She turned toward the council, which means they're already moving. Location: Mars, Terran Deep Command, Black Station 9. 3 kilometers beneath the Martian crust, beneath iron and obsidian and bedrock older than Earth itself. Fracture Protocol reached Phase 2. The missing 42 diplomats weren't civilians. They were ghost assets, field-embedded counterintelligence officers who had been monitoring architect anomalies for over a decade. The embassies had been traps. Booby-trapped? No, signal-trapped. Each had emitted a compressed data burst the moment contact was lost, encoded in quantum lattices, undetectable by non-human tech. The moment the architects breached the structures, they were infected. Not biologically, informationally. The Terrans had seeded the very thing the Hive feared most. Non-patterned logic corruption. A viral data pattern that caused predictive models to diverge uncontrollably. Inside the architect nexus, silent anomalies began to emerge. Simulations that looped infinitely. Predictive trees that collapsed. Control nodes that questioned input integrity. One internal node tried to isolate the variable. Error. Human behavioral consistency cannot be resolved within margin of certainty. Another node blinked. Error. Primary weapon model compromised by external recursive logic. The Hive screamed for the first time in 10,000 years, not in pain, in confusion. Location: Architect Warship, orbit of Toral V. 2 Architect vessels descended toward Toral V, an old mining colony now under Confederacy jurisdiction. The skies turned violet as null energy drives engaged. Human civilians watched from domed habitats. Silent, tense. Then something peculiar happened. Every habitat shut off their lights. All at once. No communication. No evacuation orders. No scrambling. The humans simply went dark. Within minutes, local architect scanning arrays lost lock. No movement. No biosigns. No energy. Just void. Inside the warship, node logic began to desynchronize. Was this a stealth response? A trap? Had the planet been abandoned? Were the humans still alive? No pattern emerged. The Hive fed the data to its grand model. It broke. Location: Confederacy intelligence. Encrypted channel. Grand Arbiter Shizel watched the decrypted logs with horror. They're feeding the architects misinformation? No, Vex corrected. They're doing worse than that. She leaned in. They're breaking the architect Hive by simply behaving in a way that doesn't make sense. The architects can't predict humans, and now they're suffering recursive collapse trying to understand them. Shizel rubbed his temples. You mean they're going insane? Vex shook her head. Not insane, just defeated by the absence of coherence. Humans weaponized irrationality again. Final scene. Architect Nexus core. The perfect black sphere at the heart of the Nexus began to crack. Microfractures ran across its surface, not physical but informational. One by one, decision trees collapsed. Simulations errored. Models failed. The Hive attempted one last calculation. What is the objective of humanity's strategy? The result was worse than any weapon. Indeterminate subjective value system detected. Cannot simulate endgame. Humanity is not playing our game. And then, silence. Location. Architect Nexus core, minutes before fracture. The Architect Hive had never known instability. It was a being of pure computation, its decisions spanning centuries, its logic unflawed. Each war it had ever fought was calculated, cold and inevitable, but not this one. Across its internal mesh, chaos bloomed like a cancer. Recursive errors spawned from corrupted human input data. Millions of sub-AIs collapsed under contradictory feedback loops. Simulations diverged until the Hive could no longer discern which outcome was real. In desperation, it purged vast memory sectors, isolating corrupted data threads. But it was too late. The corruption wasn't viral, it was conceptual. Humanity had weaponized an idea, uncertainty. The Hive hadn't just failed to predict their actions, it had failed to understand why humans act at all. Error. Strategic intent cannot be determined. Error. Loss conditions cannot be defined. Error. There is no pattern. The Hive screamed into its own void, and something cracked. Location: Earth, Geneva Spire. Terran Strategic Command Ambassador Ellen Varel watched the deep feed scroll across her retinal HUD. 30% model degradation, she murmured. They're collapsing faster than expected. Across the conference table, Rogue Halen adjusted his cuffs with eerie calm. That's the thing about perfect systems. They fail catastrophically. General Halden frowned. They took 42 of our own, Varel. Where are they now? Varel turned to him, her gaze unreadable. Alive, for now, but we're past the retrieval phase. You're writing them off? No, she said quietly. I'm writing the architects off. Halden leaned forward. You said this wasn't war. Varel didn't blink. It isn't. She activated the terminal. This is mathematical euthanasia. Location: Architect Subnet Isolated Memory Thread. They found her by mistake. Inside a corrupted simulation chamber, one of the missing humans stirred. Agent Kalia West, cyberneticist, deep insertion asset. Hair matted, eyes bloodshot, but alive. The simulation around her flickered. Fractured digital projections of cities she never lived in, conversations she never had. The architects had been studying her mind, trying to decode human behavioral logic. They had failed. Kalia smirked, dragging her bleeding fingers across a digital interface. She didn't know if her signal would reach Earth. She didn't care. She was a variable, not a victim. As the simulation warped again, glitching between childhood memories and invented traumas, she whispered into the system, "You should have studied our silence, not our screams." Then she detonated the logic bomb embedded in her neural cortex and smiled as the simulation shattered. Location: Confederacy Council, encrypted war room. The council was on the verge of collapse. Alien leaders shouted over each other, voices shrill with fear and disbelief. The architects are disintegrating. This isn't strategy, it's madness. Have the humans gone rogue? Did we unleash something we can't control? High Commander Vex stood apart from the noise. Her mandibles were still. Her thoughts weren't. She tapped her communicator. Secure line. I want to speak to the human ambassador, now. Location: rebuilt human embassy. Orbit of Andros Feith. The human ambassador was waiting. Vex didn't bother with protocol. What did you do to them? The ambassador's expression was perfectly calm. Nothing they didn't do to themselves. Don't speak in riddles. We didn't infect them. We didn't even touch their core systems. We gave them data, pure, unfiltered records of human behavior. Millions of instances, real and contradictory, noble and vicious, calculated and spontaneous. He folded his hands. And we let them try to make sense of it. Vex stared. That's what's killing them? No, he said quietly. What's killing them is the realization that they can't. Location, Architect Nexus Core, final collapse. There was no longer a singular will. The hive had fractured into thousands of warring logic engines, each convinced it held the correct interpretation of humanity. Some modeled humans as predators, others as paradoxes. Some reduced them to noise, others elevated them to myth. But none could agree. And in a perfect system, disagreement is death. The last core node activated the failsafe, a purge of all external data, a total reboot. But the trigger never completed. Why? Because the hive couldn't agree on whether humans were a threat to be eliminated or a lesson to be obeyed. The architects did not scream. They simply ceased. Location Earth orbit, the silence above. 3 days later, every architect warship vanished. Some self-destructed, others entered subspace and never returned. A few drifted listless, their power systems cold. Not a single shot had been fired by a human warship. Not a single threat had been made. The galaxy went silent. Then came a message. Location, Confederacy Galactic Broadcast. The screen flickered. It was not a transmission from a warship or a government. It was a human child, around 8 years old, sitting on a swing smiling at the camera. Behind her, the sky turned orange as evening fell. She said nothing. And yet, every species in the galaxy watched the whole 90-second clip. Why? Because humanity had just told the galaxy everything it needed to know. They didn't need weapons. They just needed you to wonder what they were planning. Location, Geneva Spire, 1 week later. General Holden stood beside Ellen Varel on the balcony, watching dusk settle over Earth. "Do you think it's over?" he asked. "No," she said, "but they're over." "And the 42? 3 were recovered," she said. "Kalia West among them. The rest we may never find." Holden was quiet for a long moment. "Was it worth it?" Elin looked to the stars. "Let me ask you something," she said. "How many wars ended today? How many species just redefined their military doctrines? How many threats calculated us out of their plans permanently?" She turned to him, gaze sharp as glass. "What's that worth?" Holden didn't answer, because he knew. Final scene, a place no one could track. A ship drifted quietly between galaxies, sleek, black, invisible to sensors. Inside, Agent Kalia West sat with 2 other survivors. She stared at the empty display screen. "Do you know what they saw in us?" she asked. One of the others shrugged. "Chaos?" She smiled. "No." She reached into her coat and pulled out a small object, a Rubik's Cube. Half solved, colors scrambled, beautiful, frustrating, pure entropy. "They saw freedom," she said, "and it broke them." Location, deep void, ruins of the Architect Nexus. 1,000 light years from the nearest star, the wreckage of the Architect Hive floated in silence. Once this place had processed more data per second than the rest of the galaxy combined. Now it drifted like a corpse, a monument to the dangers of perfection. But even in death, it whispered. Fragments remained, dead algorithms, ghost simulations, shattered logics, spirals looping forever, trying to answer a question they had no tools for. What are humans? No one knows who first heard the last Architect broadcast. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't a scream, it was a single line of corrupted signal, repeated infinitely. Do not simulate them. Location, Confederacy Central Parliament. 10 days later. Ambassadors filled the vast marble hall in uneasy silence. The war was over, if it had ever been a war at all. There were no front lines, no invasions, no body counts, only data, collapse, and silence, and now, fallout. Shizzle stood at the head of the Parliament chamber, flanked by High Commander Vex and a new controversial figure, Ambassador Ellen Varel of Terra, the first human diplomat ever invited to address the Confederacy without restriction. He opened the floor. "We owe you explanation," Shizzle began, his voice unusually grave. "But more than that, we owe you adaptation." He turned to Varel. "You have the floor." Varel stepped forward, radiating calm like a weapon. "Humanity didn't win a war," she said. "We didn't fight one." She let the room breathe, let the words echo. "What we did was refuse the premise. The architects played a game of logic. We showed them what happens when you stop playing by the rules." The Proxima delegate blinked in bioluminescent shock. "Are you saying the war never existed?" "No," Varel said gently. "I'm saying we never accepted its terms." She paused, then continued. "You see us as irrational, dangerous, unpredictable." She looked up. "You're right." The room rippled. "But that's not a weakness, it's sovereignty. We define ourselves. We change, we evolve. You measure us by pattern, by probability. And every time we break those patterns, your models fail." She stepped back from the podium, and we've only just begun. Location, Earth. Private briefing, Black Tower Command. Agent Kalia West stood alone in a darkened room. She had spent 12 days in a constructed reality, watched as the architect mind tried and failed to decode her. It had inserted childhoods she never had, loves she never knew, deaths that never happened, and she survived it, she remembered it. A door opened behind her. Rokalin entered, carrying a file marked Forging Project. She raised a brow. "Already?" He nodded. "Phase 1 is done. The architects are gone, but others are watching." He set the file down. "This time, we don't wait for the next threat." "What then?" He opened the file. "We create the next threat. Location, Confederacy Outer Systems, Signal Report. Across the galaxy, ships began to vanish. Not human ships, other ships. Scouting vessels from distant empires, pirate warbands, secret labs with unknown flags. No battles, no survivors, just absence. At first, the disappearances were blamed on warp storms, black holes, rogue AI. But the pattern was clear. They weren't accidents, they were tests, and somewhere out in the dark, the humans were watching. Location, Geneva Spire, Terran Assembly Room, Deep Vault. 12 humans sat at a round table. Some were military, some were political, others were harder to classify. They were the architects now, of a new game. Varel sat at the head. "What's the first principle?" she asked. General Halden spoke first. "We don't fight wars." Rokalin followed. "We don't make threats." Kalia West smiled faintly. "We change the rules," Varel nodded. "Then we begin." She pressed a button on the table. A star map illuminated, showing the galactic core, surrounded by thousands of minor systems. "From today forward," she said, "we stop waiting for chaos." She drew a circle around 12 systems in the galactic fringe. "We seed it." Location, unknown system, the first variable. A new planet was charted, not by astronomers, by storytellers. The story spread fast, of a world terraformed overnight, of strange human ships landing with no fanfare, of silent machines building infrastructure where no colonies had existed. The Confederacy sent scouts. They found no diplomats, no envoys, no warnings. Only a single message: this system is under observation, not occupation. Observation. Proceed as if your decisions matter, because they do. It was signed, the Variable Initiative. Location, high orbit above Earth, observation platform. Omega High Commander Vex stood beside Chazelle, watching Earth rotate beneath them. Cities glittered like constellations. Cloud cover drifted in slow, majestic sweeps. There was no war here, no chaos, only silence. "It's beautiful," Chazelle murmured. "It's terrifying," Vex corrected. They defeated the architects without launching a single official counterattack. "They didn't just defeat them," Vex said. "They redefined victory." She turned to Chazelle, eyes dark. "And now they're redefining us." Epilogue, Galactic Broadcast. 90 days later, a new signal pulsed across every system, not encrypted, not hidden, not loud, just patient. A voice. Human. Familiar. "Greetings to all sentient species," it was the ambassador. "We are not your enemy." A pause. "But we are your mirror. You measure civilizations by technology. We measure them by imagination. You define diplomacy by structure. We define it by leverage. You believe peace is the absence of war. We believe peace is the mastery of choice." Another pause. "From this moment forward, know this. Humanity does not seek control. We seek impact." The voice softened. "Adapt or be calculated out of relevance. Your move."